The defense and fall of Fort McAllister. The end of Sherman's march to the sea. William Hovey Smith, 2019. We had occasion to go to Fort McAllister Historic State Park, and this material was recorded there in conjunction with an outdoor writers meeting. I am the author of Extreme Muzzleloading, and am interested in muzzleloading things, including cannon. And I'm also the author of a business book, Create Your Own Job Security, which advocates that you start businesses when and as you need them. Now, I did two more things whilst there. One was a comedy piece, Turkey Hunting with Feathers, Chimes, and Cannon, which is now on YouTube. And the second is a video about the Georgia Outdoor Writers Association's annual meeting and Big Deer Contest. At various times, 3 or 4 large cannons, such as the one you see here, were mounted on the ramparts. And that enabled this fort to control the relatively narrow channel out to the front, which was partially blocked by a heavy steel chain which stretched across it. So the vessels had to come close onto shore and under full command of this battery. Consequently, Federal vessels, until the time of the ironclad, could not pass this point without reducing this fort. In a final effort to reduce this fort by sea, the Union Navy sent practically all of their modern vessels south to assault it. And this included the monitors, as well as some more conventional wooden ships. And they bombarded this place, and at the end of it, the only thing killed was the cat mascot of the fort. And the next day, when the dawn cleared, the fort looked like it was
this was a bunker.
It had been completely reconstructed overnight. So the heavy bombardment by the most modern cannon the Union Navy had was absolutely ineffectual, and it was so reported to the Navy Department. Exterior walls plus the earthen walls around the bunker itself. Now this looks very reminiscent of stuff from later years when trench warfare took place and was the rule in Europe. This was a magazine for the 32-pounder rifle that was used to try to command the waterway. This particular gun was not especially successful. On the opposite side is a magazine for the 8-inch Columbiad, which was a smoothbore and actually the most powerful and effective weapon used during the defense. The Confederacy used what they could get and what they had and what they could take and relocate. So very often forts like this had a hodgepodge of cannon, particularly the heavy naval stuff. They didn't have an effective arsenal that would produce, numbers of cannon of any particular type. Plus, the cannon themselves were huge, and they were very difficult to transport. They could be moved by rail fairly easily, but once you started putting them in wagons and on wood, on wagons and roads, yeah, they were tough indeed to move. In this position, overlooking the river, and closest to the enemy, Major Golly commanded this particular gun. As fort commander and a brave guy, he figured he needed to be in the forefront of the battle to inspire and direct the action of his men. And he paid for that with his life. The 8-inch Columbiad, which was a huge, heavy cast iron gun, is not located on site, unfortunately. That one is gone. However, others may be seen in other of the nation's coastal forts. They were notorious about exploding, and the cast iron was not near as strong as steel, and consequently, they sometimes failed with deadly results. This is a replica of one of the Columbiads. Now, this was not the most modern of the type, actually, during the Civil War. This was sort of semi-obsolescent. in 1864, 1865, there were much more advanced guns made, particularly in the North. The South, nonetheless, was stuck with what it had and what it could use. This is a replica gun, and it was produced by the Savannah Machine and Foundry Company as a public service to have something here similar to the original. And so it is, and this fired an 87-pound shell out to a range of 2,500 yards, easily being able to take anything that happened to be in the river there, which is less than 2,000 yards from bank to bank. This was a 32-pounder that could do serious damage against wooden ships. And even on cannon of this size, they were actually disassembled when transported. The tube was always transported separately on cannon like this, and the huge elements of the carriage were pre-built, but then disassembled and reassembled on site, just because of the bulk and the weight of the components. At Fort McAllister, this was a hot shot furnace, and this is where they actually heated round shot red hot. And so if it struck a wooden vessel, then it would have a possibility of actually igniting the wood if it stayed lodged in the hull somewhere, fell amongst something combustible like powder. So this was one of the most effective methods of defense of the day. This blacksmith shop is actually set up outside the fort, but is typical of what would be needed, because not only were the stock to be shot and reshot and so on, but any repairs made to anything made of metal, yeah, they could fabricate those reasonably well in the shop. This is a reconstruction of one of the magazines. The walls are sharply angled to keep projectiles from actually going straight into the magazine and into the powder itself. So this was a protection, and is pretty solid brick, but not up to withstanding direct hits from 15-inch guns, that's for sure. So this was also buried under a large mound of earth, and each gun had its own nearby magazine. This marker gives some of the gruesome details. The largest naval guns used against land fortifications were fired on Fort McAllister in 1863 from Monitor-type Union ironclads. 15-inch shells penetrated 17 feet of sand, digging craters 8 feet in diameter and 7 foot deep. But all damage could be repaired overnight. What? Sherman and his staff watched the final assault and the taking of Fort McAllister from 2.5 miles away, on December the 13th, 1864. The huge cannon facing the ocean could not be turned to try to repel a landward attack. And consequently, this Parrott rifle and another cannon were used to repel the final assault, which was 2,000 men against the remaining 200. And it looked pretty touch and go there for a while, they say, on the Union side. But the command was given and the assault was underway. The men came down and they dodged these stakes and they came up the walls and literally swarmed the defenders like so many ants. And so they were so outnumbered, resistance was actually fairly short once the fort was entered, although it was desperate. And some indeed did fight to the end. On the assault itself, there was comparatively few casualties, only about, say, 25 on one side and about half that number on the other. So the fort fell, but it was certainly well defended, and the Union Army knew they had had a fight. One significant naval action did occur while the fort was under bombardment from the Union vessels. The CSS Nashville had run aground opposite the fort, and the Union ironclads proceed to fire upon it and actually burn the vessel. And its remains were later salvaged, and you can see some of them under a shed there at the fort. And these are, interestingly enough, apparently made of wrought iron, a material very seldom seen these days, particularly for such massive pieces. But that was the technology of the 1840s, 1850s, so that's what they used. I am the author of Extreme Muzzleloading, and also of Backyard Deer Hunting, and crossbow hunting, among other outdoor books. My business book, Create Your Own Job Security, promotes business entrepreneurship at all ages and all conditions. From the youngest in high school, should start their own business. The oldest, should start a business so they have something productive to do in their older age. This book gives detailed instructions on how to name a business, how to get copyrights, how to get patents, and so on and so on. Now, Fort McAllister Historic State Park is open all year, and you can call the number below for reservations. Henry Ford was largely responsible for restoring this fort, which, when he saw it, was little more than a mass of overgrown sand mounds, and he, for all practical purposes, rebuilt it. For more information on my books, blogs, and more than 750 videos, you can go to my website, www.hoviesmith.com. For more information on my business books, you can go to createyourownjobsecurity.com. For more information on my screenplay and movie projects, Father of the Grooms, go to fatherofthegrooms.net. Now, this is Hovie Smith, reminding you to hunt what you eat and eat what you hunt. Be legal, be ethical, be safe. Goodbye, God bless, and see you next time.